CEO mocked single at front door. Minutes later the chairman walked out and shook his hand first. The security guard had barely finished looking at the worn jacket on Daniel Carter when the CEO laughed and told him, "People like you don't belong through these doors." Daniel stood silently at the entrance of the city's most powerful corporation, his old work boots wet from the rain, a faded leather bag hanging from his shoulder. He had come for one meeting that could change his life. Instead, in front of executives, employees, and cameras, he was treated like someone who had no right to stand there. But nobody in that lobby knew the truth about the men they were humiliating, and they certainly didn't know who would walk out of that building minutes later to shake his hand first. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and never judging someone by their appearance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Echoes of Kindness. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. Daniel had spent the last 6 years raising his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. His wife had died unexpectedly, leaving him with a mountain of bills, a small apartment, and a little girl who still slept with her mother's old scarf beside her pillow. Daniel had once worked as a mechanical engineer, but after Lily's mother died, he had left his career to care for his daughter. When the savings disappeared, he took whatever work he could find, repairing machines, unloading trucks, fixing broken equipment, and delivering supplies. His clothes became older, his hands became rougher, but he never complained. Every morning, before leaving for work, he made Lily breakfast and reminded her that being poor was not something to be ashamed of. That rainy morning, Daniel had received an invitation from Hawthorne Industries. Years earlier, before his life fell apart, he had designed a safety system that could prevent catastrophic failures in industrial machines. The patent had never been completed because the company he worked for had collapsed. Daniel had kept his research in his old leather bag, believing someday it might help someone. Recently, Hawthorne Industries had announced a dangerous manufacturing problem, and Daniel knew exactly how to solve it. He had emailed the company repeatedly, but nobody answered. Finally, he received a short message asking him to come in. When Daniel entered the lobby, the CEO, Richard Blake, happened to be coming through with several executives. Richard was young, wealthy, perfectly dressed, and accustomed to people stepping aside when he walked past. His eyes landed on Daniel's worn boots and faded jacket. Instead of asking who he was, Richard smirked. He told the receptionist that someone had clearly wandered into the wrong building. A few employees laughed. Daniel calmly explained that he had an appointment, but Richard looked at his bag and asked if he was there to repair something. The words hurt more than Daniel wanted to admit. He thought about Lily waiting at home, believing her father was going to find a better future for them. He tightened his grip on the leather bag and quietly said that he had come because he believed he could help the company. Richard shook his head and told security not to waste time on people who didn't understand where they belonged. Daniel turned toward the doors, his face burning with embarrassment. Then the elevator doors opened. Everyone in the lobby suddenly became silent. The chairman of Hawthorne Industries, Edward Hawthorne, stepped out. He was nearly 70, respected throughout the business world, and rarely appeared without advance notice. His assistant whispered something into his ear. Edward looked across the lobby and suddenly froze. His eyes landed on Daniel. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the chairman walked directly toward him. Richard's confident smile disappeared. Edward stopped in front of Daniel, reached out his hand, and shook it warmly. He called Daniel by his name and thanked him for coming. The entire lobby stared in disbelief. Richard looked confused, while Daniel stood speechless. Edward then explained the truth. 20 years earlier, when Hawthorne Industries was still a struggling company, a young engineer named Daniel Carter had saved Edward's life. During a factory accident, Daniel had rushed into a collapsing section of the building and pulled Edward away from a machine moments before it exploded. Daniel had refused a reward and simply told Edward that people were more important than money. Edward had never forgotten him. But there was more. Daniel opened his old leather bag and placed his original engineering plans on the table. Edward recognized the handwriting immediately. Daniel's forgotten safety system could solve the exact manufacturing crisis threatening Hawthorne Industries. It wasn't a random idea. It was the missing solution the company had been searching for. Richard stood completely silent. The men he had mocked at the door had just walked into the building carrying the answer to a problem worth millions. Edward looked at Richard and reminded him that success meant nothing if a person had to humiliate others to feel important. He then turned back to Daniel and offered him a senior engineering position, along with funding to complete his invention. Daniel almost refused. He explained that he didn't want charity. Edward smiled and told him it wasn't charity. It was an opportunity Daniel had already earned years ago. Daniel accepted. Months later, Daniel's invention transformed Hawthorne Industries. But the biggest change happened at home. Lily no longer watched her father count coins at the kitchen table. She saw him come home tired but smiling, carrying books and groceries instead of overdue notices. Daniel never forgot that rainy morning. He also never forgot the lesson. A person's clothes can tell you what they have been through, but they can never tell you what they are capable of becoming. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a second chance, and subscribe to Echoes of Kindness. Sometimes one small act of kindness can remind someone that the world has not forgotten them. And before we end, comment, "Kindness sees the heart," if you believe nobody should ever be judged by their clothes, their job, or the size of their bank account. Because that day, Daniel didn't need to prove that he belonged at the front door. The chairman proved it for him.